Welcome back into Live Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get the latest on the Middle East. There is a lot going on. Dr. Alon Burstein, as always, here with me alone. A lot to get to. Let's start off with this tweet from Lucas Tomlinson. He says this. He has this excerpt from an interview that Benjamin Netanyahu did with Fox News today, saying that Israel intends to control all of Gaza, but adding that they don't want to keep it. Netanyahu says he wants Arab forces to take over Hamas, after Hamas is removed from power, That led to Axios's Barak Ravid replying with this. He hasn't heard until now about any Arab country that is ready to volunteer to take over the rubble after Israel finishes completely flattening Gaza, he says. So Alon, my understanding is that the Israeli cabinet is voting to approve this as you and I speak. I got to ask you about this plan. Do we know what Arab forces Netanyahu is talking about, to Barak Ravid's point? Is it the Palestinian Authority? Is it another country? What's most likely?
It's good to see you, Austin. And first of all, yes, I will say that literally as you were reading that, there were news flashes coming in that the Israeli cabinet has approved, after a 10-hour meeting, has approved the plan that was proposed by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to completely take over the Gaza Strip. We'll get into it maybe a little bit more in details a little bit later about what that plan involves and how they're going to do it, and what they're planning to do, and how long they're saying that it's going to be. It's, I'll say, already likely several months it's going to take. But in terms of the excerpt there with regards to the day after, that was really important for Netanyahu to add for several reasons. First of all, the entire plan of going forth with expanding the operation in Gaza is a way to apply pressure on Hamas on the one hand. It's also a way for Netanyahu to cater to the pressures within his own coalition. His government has shrunk in the last several weeks. The ultra-Orthodox party's left, and he's now that much more dependent on the very hawkish elements, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir. They want Israel to expand the war. They don't want to go to a hostage deal. So on the one hand, he's leaning more towards that, both for military reasons as well as for political reasons. On the other hand, he also does not want it to seem as though Israel is intending to do this in order to establish Israeli settlements in the Gaza Strip, at least yet. He seemingly does not want that to be, maybe because of international pressure, maybe because of pressure from the United States, but he's trying to make clear we're going to expand this, but this is not in order to establish Israeli settlements. I will say, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir are saying a different thing. They are saying this is the first step towards establishing settlements, but Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying, no, that's not the case. In terms of who might be that other force that would come in, I will say at this point that I would read as more of a statement rather than anything that's leaning on any concrete facts or on any possible proposals from different Arab countries. Throughout the war, in the last almost 2 years now, we're now August 7th, almost 2 years, there have been many proposals that after some sort of agreement is reached and Hamas is no longer in power, there will be other regional actors that will come in and govern or administer the Gaza Strip. Some have suggested Egypt. Some want it to be a coalition of Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates. All these countries have expressed an interest in facilitating and rebuilding Gaza. They have all also said two things that are problematic for Israel. One, that they're not necessarily going to operate under Israel's control. It's not going to be Israel's military control, but they're governing there. They're not going to commit their troops to Israel's will. So that's a problem as far as Israel's concerned. And the second thing they said is, but it also has to be with the agreement of the Palestinians. The Palestinians, in this case, they're likely referring to the Palestinian Authority themselves, would have to be the ones to agree to this international force coming in. With regards to your point of would this be the Palestinian Authority, the only thing that the Israeli government has been extremely consistent about when it comes to the future of Gaza is what will not be there, which is not Hamas as governing power and not the Palestinian Authority as governing power. So Israel has not said what will happen, now maybe some Arab country, but they have said explicitly not the Palestinian Authority, not Hamas. So I can pretty much say that's not what Netanyahu is implying. He's not implying a Palestinian Authority. What he is implying, I'm not sure himself that he knows at this point. It's more saying this is what we'd like, now almost opening to invitations saying, so who wants to cooperate in rebuilding Gaza?
Live look at Gaza. I've been watching this camera throughout the day. I've been seeing military activity, blasts intermittently throughout the day. A bit of history here. Israel fully occupied Gaza after capturing it in the 1967 war, and then they held on to it for almost 40 years after that. Kind of bouncing off of what you were just talking about, does this week's news leave open the possibility that Israel ends up retaining control of Gaza on a permanent basis?
So that's the big fear within the Palestinians and more largely within the region and Arab world. Because after the War of 1967, which is known as different things in Israel and the Arab world, it is called the War of 1967. After that, Israel takes over the I'm going to this map, the West Bank over here, the Gaza Strip over here, the Golan Heights over here, as well as the entire Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, which eventually Israel withdrew from as part of the peace agreement with Egypt. However, Israel never annexed the territories of the Gaza Strip and the majority of the West Bank. It did annex East Jerusalem. It annexed Golan Heights a little bit later, but the West Bank and the Gaza Strip were left under occupation. And one of the reasons initially for this was that this was supposed to be temporary. This was supposed to be a temporary situation until there would be some sort of peace agreements between Israel and the Arab world. And no one at that time in the Arab world or in Israel was thinking of a Palestinian state. But there was a thought that this would be returned, the West Bank might be returned to Jordan as part of a peace agreement, and the Gaza Strip, like the rest of Sinai, might be returned to Egypt as part of a peace agreement. So theoretically, that was temporary. In the Gaza Strip, it lasted until 2005 when Israel unilaterally pulled out, and a year later, Hamas wins the elections, and then 2 years later, they take over the Gaza Strip. And in the West Bank, it's still an ongoing situation. So in theory, it's a temporary situation, but a lot of, I'll say, both critics and cynics are looking at that and saying we've had enough with Israel temporary situations of taking over the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. At this point, it is a little bit different than the West Bank because there is an active fighting going on. It's a lot less of a status quo than there has been in the West Bank, and there are not settlements there right now. But when this comes alongside statements that are being made by other ministers in cabinet, Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and others, even from Netanyahu's party, that are saying that this should be the first step towards establishing settlements, it's raising a lot of fears. Again, my own analysis, it does not appear to me that Netanyahu wants that solution right now, but he's leaving it open as a possibility for political reasons mostly, but who knows where things will go if and when that plan does come to fruition.
So, Alon, is there any other way for Israel to achieve their original war goals, which are, by the way, to eliminate Hamas and rescue the hostages? Were there any other common trains of thought as to how they could get those things done without taking full control of Gaza?
So the aims of the war, it's a great question because the aims of the war really are what's leading some of this debate. And also it's something that has changed over time. I'm going to not talk about the fact that the aims of the war were changed twice throughout the war, once pertaining to the West Bank, once pertaining to the situation in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and northern Israel. But with regard to the Gaza Strip, the original aims of the war, as you said, involved two things: destroying Hamas, and wrapped within that was and making sure that Gaza is no longer a threat. So it's not just destroying Hamas, but also taking over territory in Gaza, all these flattening operations that we've talked about, and then returning the hostages. Part of the problem, why the situation now has sort of boiled over, is Israel's chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, the person who's in charge of the military, came to the government and said, at this point, those two goals are in collision. We cannot advance further into the Gaza Strip, specifically into, we'll talk about maybe soon what this plan involves. We cannot advance more into southern Gaza City and the central camps in Deir el-Balah without endangering the hostages. So you want me to defeat Hamas? You want me to return the hostages? You have to decide what comes first. That's why the military chief of staff, as well as the head of the Mossad, as well as elements within Israel's Shabak, all said, don't do this plan yet. You have to first come up with a deal and bring the hostages out, then you can do this plan. But the decision that came up was a little bit different. So that's in terms of the goals. Another very important feature as part of this very public statement that Israel is putting out more and more about its current intentions, which is obviously meant to pressure Hamas also, Israel did officially change the aims of the war with regards to the Gaza Strip just a few days ago as part of these negotiations. And what was added was defeating, it didn't say exactly what, but defeating Hamas and taking over the Gaza Strip is now part of the aims of the war. So could the previous aims had been fulfilled? Possibly. There might have been other ways, and Israel said if Hamas would accept its terms, release the hostages, go into exile, disarm, then theoretically you don't need to go into further military action. But at this point, the aims of the war have actually been readjusted, that this is part of the aims. That said, that's also somewhat rhetoric. If this was in response to a demand of the hawkish elements in government, and even as this plan was approved, Netanyahu also said, but we're going to do it gradually, and we're going to leave room for Hamas to possibly come back to us and decide that now wants to accept our terms. So that's where we are in terms of achieving the goals. The chief of staff said the goals collide. It's either the hostages or destroying Hamas. What comes first? The Israeli cabinet said they wants the army to expand at this point, and they've even changed the war aims to include now taking over all of Gaza.
So tell us about this plan. The cabinet now approving it. Is there a timeline for when this will happen? What more do we know about how it works?
So the plan involves essentially two main things. If you want to expand the map, I'll show where we're now focused. So the IDF has been operating in the vast majority of the northern parts of the Gaza Strip over here. It's also been operating, it's taken over the southern parts of Rafah over here and the eastern parts of Han Yunis. But the IDF has not moved ground forces into, or is not operating ground forces right now in three main areas. One is the Mawasi refugee camp. That is the main humanitarian zone right next to the coast over here. The other is the central camps. That is Deir el-Balah is the main city. And then you have Nuseirat refugee camp, Bureij, El-Maghazi, and a few more. Those two areas, Mawasi and the central camps, the IDF has not operated ground forces in throughout the entire war. It is one of the only areas in the Gaza Strip that the IDF has not taken over, and one of the only areas that still has a majority of buildings still standing. And then there's the southern parts of Gaza City over here, the areas of Zaytun and Rimal and those areas over there. The IDF operated there in the past, it has not operated there now. These strongholds of Hamas, right now, the Al-Qassam brigades, the main fighting brigades, remain in the southern areas of Gaza City and in these areas in the central camps. The IDF also estimates that most of the hostages, at least the live ones, are in these central camps over here. So when the military, when the government is now voting that the military is going to expand, it is talking about those three areas. It is talking specifically about Gaza City, the central camps, and possibly even the area in the Mawasi refugee camp. What the plan involves, according to what the leaks, and again, this was approved literally as you were introducing me, I saw the second flash that this has been approved. So we don't know a lot yet, but what we do know, according to what was proposed, and presumably that's what was approved, is that the plan involves a gradual expansion of the IDF activity, moving first into northern Gaza, the areas of Zaytun, Rimal, and other areas over here, and then moving into the central camps over here. The entire thing that they're talking about now is supposed to take between 4 to 5 months. So again, we were looking several weeks ago at possibly a deal that was going to happen any day. Now we're talking about a military expansion that's going to happen 4 to 5 months. But what this is also going to involve, and this is going to be one of the major things, if this plan does come to fruition and it is executed, one of the things I guarantee you we'll be talking about again and again is the humanitarian situation. Since January, since the truce that happened then, some 800,000 Palestinians have returned to northern Gaza. This plan now has them again mobilized and moving towards the Al-Mawasi refugee camp. It's also going to involve mass evacuations of civilians from these areas. We have seen throughout the war, these mass evacuations cause humanitarian disasters. They cause people to be crammed into refugee camps. It's caused people to not have enough sanitation, water, food. So as part of this plan, at least what was rumored, Israel's also planning a substantial increase in humanitarian aid and sort of rebuilding it in the form of more distribution sites of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But it's also going to be very hard to implement. One last thing I'll say, at the same time, again, it seems very obvious that Israel is constantly saying right now it wants Hamas to come back and accept the terms that Israel put forth for a hostage deal. And one of the things is, first of all, they're being so public about this over the last several days, leak after leak after leak, that Israel's about to do it, that they're about to approve it, they're about to happen, it's about to do, is making a plan very public compared to when you're carrying out a secret military operation. This is telling the other side, this is what we're going to do. Israel also said now that it's specifically going to start from northern Gaza, and then the operation can be halted if and when Hamas comes back. So everything that I said about how long this is going to take and the launching of this is, contingent upon the fact that it actually is launched and Hamas does not come back to the table. That's where we are right now. Obviously, we'll know more as Hamas now responds maybe to this latest escalation.
Some tweets that are coming in as the breaking news is unfolding. Barak Ravid saying Israeli officials are telling him that the security cabinet has approved Netanyahu's proposal for the occupation of Gaza City. He follows up by saying that the prime minister's office says, quote, the security cabinet approved the prime minister's proposal to defeat Hamas. The IDF will prepare to take control of Gaza City while providing humanitarian aid to the civilian population outside the combat zones. We'll be watching to see how this plays out as time passes. Alone. One thing we got to hit before we move on here, we got to talk about Lebanon. Exclusive from Reuters, they have this. They are reporting that the U.S. is presenting Lebanon with a proposal to disarm Hezbollah by the end of the year, along with ending Israel's military operations in the country. Reuters says this is the most detailed steps yet for disarming the Iran-backed group, which has so far rejected calls to disarm. Where does it feel like this is heading, Alon? Would Hezbollah be no more if this moves forward? Does it feel like this proposal is going to move forward?
So it's the big question that everyone's asking right now with regards to the region. And in order to understand where this came from, we have to take a bit of a step back to almost a year ago. In October of 2024, Israel invades southern Lebanon. You can see it here, just the southern part of the map here, basically going almost all the way to the Litani River, which is this area over here marked in blue. That's the area that's considered southern Lebanon. It's about a third of the country. And during that time, Hezbollah is really beaten back. It's really beaten back with, everything from the pager attack, the walkie-talkie attack, to thousands of its operatives are injured, to Hassan Nasrallah being assassinated and his successor being assassinated. All these things really weaken Hezbollah to the point that then when Israel and Iran finally, after years of a Cold War between them, go to active war in June of this year, Hezbollah doesn't even respond. Hezbollah was created to be Iran's arm there, doesn't even respond. So Hezbollah is vastly weakened militarily at this point. And politically, Hezbollah is also a political body in Lebanon. It sits in government. It has ministers. It has politicians. And they are also weakened because their mandate until now has been, we defend Lebanon from Israel. Well, they failed at that and actually brought a lot of damage to Lebanon. Within this atmosphere, at the beginning of July, the United States Special Envoy to the region of Syria and Lebanon, Thomas Barak, someone we don't talk about as much as Steve Witkoff because he's specifically to those regions, put forth a proposal / a bit of a demand to the Lebanese government, saying you have to now push this forward. And that was a 4-phased plan that was supposed to be implemented over the next anywhere between 6 months to a year, that is meant to disarm Hezbollah. And disarm is important. It's not meant to dismantle Hezbollah. Hezbollah also has networks of charities. It also runs hospitals. It also runs a banking service. It is also an entire body. This is not saying Hezbollah has to stop existing, but to disarm Hezbollah specifically. And that plan involves, like I said, 4 phases. The first phase is a declarative one that the government will vote, that the army will come up with a plan to disarm Hezbollah by the end of December. So the government has to vote now that a plan will be developed by the end of December of 2025 to disarm Hezbollah. Then phase 2 is going to be that the plan starts to be implemented and Israel withdraws from 3 out of the 5 positions that it has held in southern Lebanon. That's these positions over here that it's held in southern Lebanon. It will withdraw from there. Then phase 3 will be further withdrawals, and phase 4 obviously is completing the disarming, and etc. All that being said, the main thing that happened this week is that the government did in fact take that first step. The government in Lebanon met on Tuesday, but more importantly, the more important meeting happened today on Thursday, and despite massive pressure from Hezbollah, despite thousands of Hezbollah supporters being in the street, despite the politicians from Hezbollah and their sister organization Amal all walking out of government as a result of the fact that the Hezbollah and Amal ministers walked out, the government voted unanimously to approve the U.S. document. So the first step has now been taken. The president and prime minister are going to task the military in Lebanon to come up with a plan to disarm Hezbollah by the end of 2025. That plan then is now supposed to take, I think, 60 days, if I remember correctly, until they actually present that plan and how it's going to be. So there's still a lot of phases, a lot of hurdles to pass. But the fact that this happened, and more importantly, the fact that this happened without any violence. Lebanon is a war-torn country. It has seen civil wars, some of the bloodiest civil wars that the Middle East has seen happened in Lebanon. It is a country that has multiple ethnicities, the refugee camps where there's massive amounts of weaponry. The fact that this passed, at least until now, and also in the days leading up to it, there's been a lot of threats, a lot of talk, but no violence, is somewhat indicative that the majority of the population, at least at this point, seems to be in favor. They are not happy with where Hezbollah has taken the country. So it looks like the trend is towards this actually going through. Will it actually get to a disarming? And will we get to Hezbollah existing as a political body and non-armed body? That's already far into the future. But the mere fact that the government is taking the first step and willing to agree to that is the big step that happened in the region, really.
We always appreciate your educational approach to the analysis. Alon uploads his own uploads, I should say, on his personal account. What's that account called, Alon?
So it's called the Israel-Palestine Report. You can find it on YouTube. And again, it's basically a lot of these analyses, and I try to do once a week summary of what's happening primarily in the Israel-Hamas arena, but also if there are these other arenas that affect what's going on in the Israel-Palestine situation. So the Israel-Palestine Report.
We will see you soon. Feel free to give Alon a subscribe. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Let's slide away for a commercial break. We're back in 2 minutes.